Welcome to our Five Smooth Stones podcast, and I'm so happy to have Nancy Wilson here with us. We have started a series on how to create and develop a special needs ministry in your church to children that would integrate the five principles, the five smooth stones in Deuteronomy chapter 6 into a special needs ministry. And this week we want to talk with Nancy about experiential teaching methods. And the idea of experiential teaching is that we don't just engage the children cognitively, but we engage all of their senses, their taste, their smell, their hearing, and kinetic teaching. And so it's a hallmark of EGM's teaching ministry, and we think it's crucial in ministering to special needs children. So Nancy, when you think about experiential teaching, what are your thoughts about that in regards to special needs kids?
Well, I think it's a great thing because particularly with kids with disabilities, they have auditory issues and hearing issues, but experiencing something is so much better. It's really the best way for children with disabilities to learn. It really is.
So we have a boy in our children's ministry, and a few weeks back I was teaching on how God provides for us, and it's not just materially, but he provides for us spiritually and in every way. And we were using the story of the manna in the wilderness. So the activity that I created was I took really thin onion skin, I think kind of paper you call it, and I wrote the fruits of the Spirit on it. And I had I think I had 50 copies, and I cut them up into little squares, and I had them in some kind of basket or something. And when I got to the part about God made the manna rain down on the Israelites, I threw the manna up in the air, and the onion skin papers went flying all over. And then I said, whoever collects the most wins. And you should have seen. Well, there's a couple of kids in the program that I think are on the spectrum, as we learned from the first week, and they're like diving under the table. You could just see they were so engaged, right? And then I had them read them, and then you had to make sure you had a complete set, so they're like exchanging them with each other.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, it was the greatest activity, and then I went on and explained about how God provided for the Israelites, and it was just such a great reminder to me of how kids learn through doing and action. And yeah, I don't think they'll ever forget the manna. Well, they won't forget for quite a while. It's memorable to them. Well, when you think about activities like that, what are some things you've seen work with special needs kids in terms of experiential methods and so on?
I think what you first have to do is make sure, like if somebody has trouble with touch or with sound, so you kind of have to see what's happening in the classroom before you decide, okay, we're going to do this.
Like that activity I just did in some cases might not be good. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had some kids that might run over and bite you because they hated the sound. But, you have to think what would be the best for the child, to how they would react to whatever it is that we're using. And so...
what a great, we talked about that last week, though. This message just keeps coming up. You got to study these kids carefully and individually, because what would work for one may not from the other, and you have to be really a student of the kids, don't you?
Yep, and if you have a child who's allergic to something and you don't want them eating.
Yeah, well, that's true for all kids, though. But,
yeah, that is true.
But still, things that you would think would be a fun, engaging, experiential activity may be totally inappropriate in a given group of kids.
Yep, very true.
Well, in my experiential activity, I know that when my wife was that age, she would not have been diving under the table, nor my daughter. It's just not there, it's not how they roll. So when you think about special needs kids and experiential activities, what are some things you need to be concerned about as you're talking about the differences in kids, practically speaking, things that could be...
Well, okay, so you have to watch out for things that they might try to eat. That was always my concern, because these kids pretty much, some of them will just eat anything.
So the onion skin paper, they might just plop it in their mouth.
Yeah, and eat it. So, I mean, that wouldn't hurt them. But
still,
if you had, a big wad of something, and yeah, you kind of have to watch out for what they might eat and what they shouldn't eat. Whether and touch is so interesting because some kids don't like to touch other things
Or be touched.
or be touched, and if you try to touch them or give them, they flip out and they'll get upset and probably hit you. So you kind of have to know, and this is where I enroll the parents as well. Okay.
I imagine some people are listening in now, writing things down feverishly. Don't touch. Really, you got to be careful,
You
right?
do. You have to be so careful.
Careful about eating. Careful about touch and touching them.
Sound. You have to be
Sound.
careful. Some kids are very adverse to loud music and loud sounds, while others think it's great. So it's interesting, but you have to be a student of your student because you have to know it's going to work and what's going to cause them to, have a problem.
So, what are some experiential activities that you've seen work with kids when you've taught?
They seem to really like Play-Doh, and things like that, and they can eat that.
So
that's
tactile
good.
kinds of things,
Yeah.
things they can
Yeah.
use their hands to work with.
Yeah.
Play-Doh.
Play-Doh. What else? Oh gosh, I'm going back in my brain like, wait, whoa. But oh gosh.
Do lots of special needs kids like to work with their hands in
Yes.
general?
Yes, they do.
Drawing, folding.
Yes, and even the okay, what am I thinking of?
Finger painting.
Finger painting.
Is there an, and I don't know anything about this, so I'm just kind of trying to learn myself. What about fine motor skills, gross motor skills? So when they play with Play-Doh, my little 3-year-old granddaughter would make something more, not maybe so aesthetically sophisticated,
yes, exactly.
shall we say. And then my 6-year-old grandson would, he's getting more fine motor skills, and he might make something. So how does that work with special needs children? In terms of their motor skills, does it just vary?
It just varies. You have to just try it and see what they react to. Some kids are fine. Okay, let's draw. All right, that's fine, and they draw all over, and that's great. Others would go, I'm not doing that, and probably throw something at you.
What about sense of smell?
That's a biggie. And it's, the funny thing is that adults have a problem with sense of smell.
Sure.
So it as long as it's not too strong, and that's why we always encourage our teachers, please don't wear cologne.
Strong makeup.
Yeah, and
strong
because of the smell.
perfumes and that sort of thing.
Because some kids are very adverse to those.
And what about sense of taste? Like I have a boy in my class we've done a few activities that are experiential activities that involved tasting things, and he says I have a really bad gag reflex.
Oh, interesting. Well, at least he told you. That was nice.
Yeah.
Instead of throwing up all over you.
Yeah.
But that's something you have to. And again, I would enroll the parents and say, okay, what about this? What if we did this? What would your child do? Just so you kind of have a heads up as to, okay, we can take this and with these kids, but maybe these kids over here should have something else to do because we don't want them throwing up all over you.
So when we teach experientially, there's this notion that the child has, you create an activity that's an experiential activity for them. They go through an experience, and then we try to connect that to the Bible teaching. So when you take, if you were going to teach children that God created the world in Genesis chapter 1, and you gave them Play-Doh beforehand and had them make something and create something, are there issues in making that connection between how did you feel about creating, and what did you see, and how was that experience, to the experience of that God created our world in that same fashion, but it's God creating the whole world and so on. Do you have issues with that in terms of the teaching method?
Not issues, but I'm not sure every child would understand. And I think we just have to go with that, that they understand some things and they don't understand others. And that might be a little bit harder. I mean, they would understand making something, but to connect it to God, but you try it. I mean, since
I'm
not
just
doing
curious.
it.
If you, I did this a couple of weeks ago where I had, it was about making good choices that please God. And sometimes we think that our choices don't really matter, and they do.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to teach the kids, the boys and girls that. And so we had two glasses. One had water in it. There was actually 7-Up that we had made flat, but so it just looked like water. And then we had another one that was water that had vinegar in it. Just a little bit, not too much, because we got the boy with the gag
Yeah.
reflex. I knew just a couple drops, but enough to, it didn't taste nice. And so then we told them they could choose. And then we would fill their little cup, like almost a communion cup, with whatever that water they wanted. We didn't want them to do it ahead of time because then they'd know what was in what. And then you tasted it. And then we talked about how, so they had an experience of sweet decision or sour decision. Was the idea. And then we talked about how things appear to be the same, but they're really not. And what we choose to do really does matter, and it matters to God. And then we, I think that we told, it might have been the story of Ananias and Sapphira. And you think that it doesn't matter that you kept some of the money back when you sell the land, but it does. And it was a bad decision. So the question is, how do you think that sort of approach, it can work, or don't try it, or?
I would try it. I mean,
But some of the kids just aren't maybe not going
They
to.
may not have the, capacity to understand that. But they can at least participate with their friends and maybe get some idea of what's going on.
And enjoy the activity.
Yeah.
At least it's an activity and
Oh,
not just sitting
absolutely.
there.
Yep.
So do you have the same issue where a lot of boys and girls just get tired of sitting and listening all the time? In Sunday school, at school in general, they're active learners. Is that similar with special needs children? Where
Yeah.
it seems like it would be a
Yeah.
really key strategy.
It is a key
Just
strategy.
to get them to move
Get
and
up
do
and
stuff.
Move.
And
Yep. Absolutely it is.
All right. Well, if a children's ministry leader is listening in today and they've gotten the vision in the first podcast, and then last week they decided, we need to have a relational ministry approach, and they wanted to try to teach experientially with special needs kids, what's an encouraging word that Nancy Wilson could offer them today?
I think go for it. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, they could absolutely love it, or they could, spit it out in your face. Just, let's be honest here, it's happened. But you've got to at least try. And I think we are surprised sometimes at how much they understand, or kind of try to begin to understand. And I really do think you have to put that in front of them and say, let's see what happens.
And we talked, I think last week, about how sometimes there's a wall that the disability creates, but behind it is a person that has a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, just like you and I do, and they just may have difficulties in expressing it and so on. And it seems like if you engage in this sort of methodology, you don't really know what kind of impact it's having on them.
Oh, absolutely.
I know it's a great way to teach. I've done it for years and it has such an impact. Okay, well, so if you were out there trying to develop a special needs ministry, we would encourage you to teach experientially, as it encourages us in Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9. And God will use that to bring his transforming gospel to special needs children in your church community. So thanks for joining us this week, and we look forward to being with you again.